Welcome to That 30 Show, a podcast where we talk about the good, the bad, and the surprising parts of our 30s. I'm G, and I'm finally 30. I'm excited to find out if 30 really is the new 20, because if it is, then the best years are yet to come.
And I'm David. I'm entering my mid-30s. I used to have no back pain or trouble sleeping, but now I live off a healthy diet of self-help books and dream of being in bed by 10 p.m. every night. Join us each week as we try to figure out together what life in your 30s is all about.
Welcome back to That 30 Show.
Welcome back. You mentioned before we start recording, you have dinner at 7. What's the plan there?
Just going for dinner. One of my friends is back from the States for a while, and then we'll see where the night takes us. Last night I was at bowling and karaoke for my friend's birthday. That was pretty fun.
What's your
I didn't drink a lot.
Song?
My go-to karaoke song. I don't have one, but my friend's is always I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith. Like, she has to sing that every time.
That's the song that my guy friends and I specifically, who are a little bit silly when we go to karaoke. And that's the song that we end the night with, because if our voice is not already dead by the end of the night, we go and destroy it with this song. Because we can't sing very well, obviously. So we just end up screaming half the song. Yeah. Especially that part where like the lead singer goes higher. You know that when it goes like higher and higher and it goes, ah!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uday is a great singer. He loves to like sing at karaoke, but it's annoying because his voice dominates everyone else's. Yesterday I was trying so hard to out-sing him and I just couldn't. And today my voice just feels shot because he can sing loud even without the mic. And I'm over here like screaming and he's still singing louder than I am. So I have been noticing some things ever since I turned 30, which was about a month ago. One of those things is that I've been getting a lot of gray hairs at an alarming rate. And it's stressing me out because I'm like looking in the mirror and I'm like, holding up my hair and I just see so many white strands. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening so fast. I was not expecting this.
People get really stressed out about that. Like some people dye their hair nonstop for their entire lives because they don't want to have like some aunties I know or like moms and stuff, right? They always dye their hair because they don't want to have silver hair. I don't know. Maybe it's a guy thing in the sense that like our hair is shorter or it's less noticeable. That's one of the things I want to talk about today because I think there's a lot of these common things that happen in our 30s and we want to react to what these are. Whether we have an opinion on it, whether we're looking forward to it, whether we agree. That's actually on my list to ask you about is the gray hair thing. I don't really buy into this obsession people have with being and looking young. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting old.
No, I don't think so either. I just...
I'm all about embracing who you are. And if you're 40, if you're 50, I don't really get it. I don't like people who try and pretend they're younger or they want like they're fishing for compliments about how young they look. This is very common in Chinese culture, right? The biggest compliment you can give someone, especially a older female, is to be like, oh, wow, you look so young. Can you tell me why? Maybe it's more female thing. Like what's the big deal?
So, well, I was very excited to turn 30. I'm not against getting older at all. It was just very unexpected that as soon as I turned 30, I started noticing, or maybe I just didn't notice it before, but I started noticing all these gray hairs. For some reason, it made me feel older than 30. And I feel like as soon as I turned 30, it's like accelerating for some reason. No, but also I've been thinking about other things like, just even going out and the time it takes to recover. So I thought it'd be fun for us to take a look at some stereotypes.
So you have a list and I have a list.
I found a fun website with a bunch of cartoons that shows like what the side-by-side comparison of different topics, like your 20s and your 30s. Okay, and you have a list?
I have a list. Oh, actually, well, before we get into the list, I'll tell you where I got my list from.
Okay.
I just asked ChatGPT
Oh.
So I asked ChatGPT, I mean, it's whatever, right? Like, but I asked ChatGPT, I'm turning 30 today. I'm not. I'm just asking ChatGPT. I'm turning 30 today. Can you share some of the most common things that happen during this decade for people? Common trends, life changes, new challenges that come with being in your 30s. Be creative and funny in your observations. And then it gave me a list, so I'll get you to react to that.
That's so interesting. I mean, not that we can get into this today, but I haven't really figured out how to properly use ChatGPT. So like you're supposed to be really descriptive. You're not just supposed to like plug in a couple words and then.
Yeah, there's many different ways. I mean, it's the new art form. It's the new skill. It's AI prompting. It's a thing where like people argue that this is something that if you know how to do it well, like it's a skill that will be sought after. But yeah, one of the most helpful things I've noticed is to ask ChatGPT or something like that to role play or be something. So you will say like, for example, my partner, I feel like she used it in a really strategic way, which is, you know, she asked ChatGPT, I don't know verbatim, but she asked ChatGPT to be essentially some business school professor or graduate or like Harvard business or Stanford, you know, like someone with like a professional business background degree. And then it's like, she's like, oh, well, when I use ChatGPT and I role play like that, I essentially have access to someone that I would have to pay a lot of money for.
Wow.
And I mean, I don't know, I'm probably simplifying it, but you ask ChatGPT to be a certain thing.
Yeah.
And then so like, for example, some of our episode descriptions or titles, I've asked it to be like, you're a world-class podcast marketing executive.
Okay, so I haven't been using it right because all the results that I've generated, I'm like, these are kind of lame. But then when you do it, I'm like, whoa, all these ChatGPT is so smart and brilliant. So, okay, there's a skill.
Anyway,
there's a skill to it.
That's a whole tangent.
Okay. So for mine, we'll link it in the show notes because these are comic strips. So this first one, the theme is phone calls. The picture in the 20s is like when the phone rings. Yes, someone remembered me. And then in the 30s, the girl is like really grumpy and she's like, ugh, for God's sake.
My first reaction to this is I feel like this is more of a Gen Z and millennial versus boomer thing. Young people, especially even in their millennial generation, we don't like phone calls. It doesn't matter whether we were 20 or 30. I think back when we were in university already, it's like, why are you calling me? I remember in the past decade, I have this one friend who's super known for making phone calls. And at his wedding, everyone was talking about it. Everyone was like, wow, this guy, he's the only one who still calls. And everyone said it in a very nice, as a positive thing, right? Because it's so authentic. It's so sincere. It's like, wow. And then when you're talking, it feels good. My reaction is that's more of a generational thing, not a 20s and 30s thing.
I used to make a lot of phone calls in high school.
Yes, because that was
before,
before
apps
anything
and Messenger.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I remember back in high school, I had this one friend who always called to ask about homework and stuff. I remember we had on our episode where Olivia asked us questions. She asked us phone call or text, and then you said text, and I said phone call.
Yeah. Was is that a preference or is that just what you do more often?
No, of course I don't do phone calls often. No one calls. Now I'm in a relationship, so obviously I call my girlfriend. Yeah. But if I'm single, I'm not. Yeah, no one's calling me. I'm not calling anyone. But I love phone calls. Like our podcast is kind of like a phone call. Yeah,
it is. Younger people these days, I think they use like what is that? FaceTime a lot. Like if they want to chat with their friends, they just FaceTime them. And I was like, whoa, that's so interesting.
Really?
Like I'd never done that.
I can't do that. Okay, my turn. The adulting phase. Suddenly, responsibilities start creeping up on you like those pesky gray hairs. Bills, mortgages, and the realization that furniture doesn't assemble itself become an integral part of your life. You'll find yourself engaging in conversations about property prices and investing in stocks, pretending to know what you're talking about while secretly wondering where all your pocket money went. Any comments?
That's funny. The investment part, I definitely feel like is accurate. You know, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to like investments. Like maybe my money is just going nowhere and I have no idea. But I like to be like, oh yes, I invest. I'm doing all these financial things that make sense, but I don't even actually know if it makes sense. But all the other stuff, I think definitely when I moved out. Before I moved out, a lot of these things were not relevant. It is half an age thing because you're moving out when you're, you know, like later in life. But once I moved out, I had to deal with a lot more of these things. property tax and empty homeowners tax and all these crazy taxes that we have.
Building off of the finance thing, I actually think that's, super relevant. Our mutual friend group have spent at least one evening sitting around talking about, crypto and stuff.
Yeah.
And so
that went right over my head. I
remember you were so disengaged that night. But I remember that year you had a New Year's resolution to learn how to invest or something like that.
Yeah, I did. So I was really into it for a while. Like I went to a financial advisor, I read some books, and then I feel like I kind of did the most basic stuff that a person should do when like investing. And then I never dove into it. So.
Well, I feel like unless you're like super freaking rich, if you buy property, which you have said on this podcast that you have, that's basically your investment portfolio.
Yeah.
I have a lot to say about investment, but I certainly got into investing more in my 30s because I was like, oh, okay, inflation is really killing me. I really should do something with this money. And yeah, unless you're like a finance pro, though, I think it's definitely something that you try to wade into in your 30s, but not earlier. But then nowadays, right, you got people trying to like tell you to buy the NFT or the crypto or the Tesla or Apple stocks.
We also just have more disposable income to kind of play with.
Yeah, exactly.
Too,
I think actually, you know what, we should do an episode on investment and maybe think of a friend who has experience.
Yeah,
because it's a very relevant thing, and certainly our podcast, we're not trying to say that we're experts in anything, but it's just like, if you have these conversations with friends, we sort of want to replicate that on here. We'll move on to the next topic, but the one thing I'll plug about investment is that everyone should look into index investing, and that's all I'll say.
Yes, I think I know this about you. You invest in index funds. Okay, this next one the topic is injuries. And so in your 20s, this guy, it looks like he's riding a motorcycle or bike, and this like car like ran into him, probably maybe doing something extreme. And he's like all like battered up and bloody, and he's like, I'm fine. And then in your 30s, these two people are talking, and the girl's like, what's up with your neck? The guy has a neck brace, and the guy's like, I slept in a weird position.
This reminds me of, I had a friend over, we were doing some home maintenance thing, and then he was just bending down to pick up something off the floor, and then he stood up, and he was like, oh. I was like, what? He's like, oh, head rush. Oh, and then the other day, another friend of mine, he pulled his back while playing with his dog. These are both people in their early 30s.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have any injuries? What's the worst injury you've had in your life, if I may ask more morbidly?
I've never had any broken bones or anything like that. Nothing crazy, to be honest. Like probably when I blew out my eardrum, maybe it was the worst thing that's happened to me. But that was as a result of diving.
That sounds painful and gross.
Yeah, it was both painful and gross.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was like, if I had to describe the top 3 most painful things that I've ever had to endure in my life, like that would be number 1 or 2, I think.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I can't. That gives me like the tingles, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
I definitely have to maintain my body a lot more, like in terms of doing stretching, incorporating stretching into my daily routine, and making sure that I stretch after exercise. Before I don't.
I definitely realized that I can't just start like an exercise cold turkey anymore. I don't know if it's necessarily that I have to do that now, but I've just been incorporating that more now, like what you said, like the stretching and like the warm up, rather than just jumping into an exercise without doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, next. Another common trend in your 30s is what ChatGPT calls the workout mirage. Fitness becomes an obsession in your 30s as you realize that metabolism is no longer your best friend. You join gyms, try out every trendy exercise class, and become a master at making kale smoothies that you secretly loathe. But despite your best efforts, your body stubbornly clings to that extra slice of pizza you had last night, reminding you that you're no longer in your sprightly 20s.
I think the website that I found had something similar as well. I would agree and disagree. I feel like in my early 20s, I was more obsessed with those fitness classes and, well, actually, that's not true. I'm still pretty obsessed with those. But I feel like I was more obsessed with like this kale smoothie, like making sure everything is like healthy, like being overly obsessed, I think. And then in my 30s, like I'm just doing it because like I do it to feel good and it makes me feel good and I just do it. But I definitely have noticed that your body doesn't change as much as like when you were in your 20s. Like in your 20s, you could do like a few exercises like a few times a week and your body would change right away. Whereas in your 30s, you're like, I'm not seeing any results from this. Like what is happening? Your metabolism's like shot.
For what it's worth, I think I definitely relate to this a lot more than you do. I never cared about exercise in my 20s. I was lucky to be naturally fit and athletic, perhaps even skinny because my metabolism was so high. But, you know, I was an athletic guy. I go hiking, I play badminton, and I was always slim. But as I turned 30, maybe with COVID and stuff, I realized that I saw my waistline increasing. And certainly that's not the be all end all of your health, but I didn't like that. I didn't feel good about myself. And so I was like, okay, this is not something that I want to tolerate. So that's actually what got me into exercising more.
I will say in my early 20s, I was doing a lot more different exercise. I did a lot of HIIT training. I don't even know if I can do that now. I just remember doing like an hour of HIIT, which is actually maybe not even the correct way to do HIIT because HIIT is supposed to be like a quick.
That's way too long for HIIT.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like 20, 30 minutes. But the classes were called HIIT. So it's like bursts of like Tabata style or whatever. I haven't done those kinds of classes in so long. And honestly, I don't even know if I could do them now. Like I definitely had more energy and stamina to do that in my earlier 20s. And now it's more like strength training and some cardio.
Okay, next.
Okay, this next one is called friends. In your 20s, you got this big group of friends like at this party. There's like 20 people and it says, my gang of friends. And then in your 30s, you're like standing there by yourself and you're like, this is my only friend, Steve. Please don't die, Steve.
We talked about friendships quite a lot in this podcast. So I don't know what we want to add. But I guess that comic, the first panel comic with a lot of friends, it reminds me of my first year university. So I did high school in Hong Kong. So coming to university in Vancouver, I didn't have any friends. And so I remember first year, especially living on campus, the mentality was really like everyone was just desperate to make friends because everyone had no friends. And so I was going to all these, looking back at my photos, I was going to all these weird parties with people I don't know, random excursions and parties that now seem completely uninteresting because it's with complete randos. But then back then you're just so desperate for friends. Every opportunity you have for a social hangout, you're like, yes, I'm going, because you don't want to be that person who just says no. And then it's almost like a race maybe in first year university because no one has settled down into the friendships yet. Everyone's still testing to see who they want to settle down with, who they vibe with. And I think it's kind of like speed dating, but speed friendshiping. Yeah. Did you have that experience at all? Did you live on campus?
I only lived on campus for one semester. I honestly didn't have that experience because like I didn't go to a lot of parties or anything like that in my university life, I feel like, because I live kind of far. So I would never hang out around campus much. I only joined like the one club that we were both a part of at UBC. But other than that, I wasn't really part of university life. And my classes were like so large that I couldn't, like if you met someone beside you, one class, you're never going to see them again for the rest of the semester because the class is like 400 people. So
I never made friends from my classes, actually. And it sounds like you didn't either.
No.
I was only going to class with like a mission. I'm just here to try and stay awake. That was what and I failed most of the time.
Yeah, I think if you have smaller classes, it's easier. If you have a large seminar, like there's no way that it's really impossible to make friends. So
yeah. No, I have to admit, over the years, on Facebook and stuff, I sometimes see this random person show up on my newsfeed. I'm like, okay, they're
who is that?
They're completely irrelevant. Like, let me just unfriend them. And this is not me being on, whatever. People do that to me too, right?
Yeah.
But that was back then when you wanted to add every living soul. Like, you might just have made eye contact. You're like, okay, you're on my Facebook now. Mine one's also friends, so I'll read it out and you can let me know what you think. In your 30s, maintaining friendships requires Olympic-level multitasking skills. Between career commitments, family obligations, and the occasional Netflix binge, finding time for socializing becomes akin to solving a complex mathematical equation. You'll also discover the awkwardness of running into acquaintances from high school. I want to get your take on high school. Do you sometimes creep your high school friends and be like, wow?
Never. Like, I mean, they'll show up on my feed, because I still have a lot of high school friends on my social media, but I never I don't really care. A lot of the friends that I have are still from high school. So of course, those friends I care about because we still stay in touch, but other friends, I don't really care. Like, I didn't go to my 10-year reunion, and not because I felt some type of way, like where I am versus where others are. I guess I don't really care, to be honest.
Oh, I mean, I don't spend a ton of time on this, but I certainly, when I'm on LinkedIn and I'm scrolling and I see some high school friend, it's very interesting for me to click on the profile and be like, oh, what kind of job are they?
Oh, really?
Like, and it's going to be some like managing director at some tax firm. I'm like, all right, shut the fuck up. Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm so far removed from that part of my life that I don't know them anymore.
The high school friends that you're friends with, have you guys not changed very much? How do you guys still keep the bond there?
We have changed. Like, there are some friends, really good friends of mine, that I don't see as often anymore. And when we do see each other, it's like nothing has changed. We're like the same silly selves as our high school days, I feel like. And we always talk about high school. Every time we get together, we talk about all the memories that we had in high school. And it's just great. But there are some others that we have like really similar interests. So we talk a lot more on the regular. So yeah, some friends we like kind of grew and at the same pace and level, I guess. And some other friends, not so much the same interest, but we can always hang out and like have a great time together.
What archetype were you in high school?
I would say the social butterfly.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I had
like popular.
Not exactly
friends.
popular, but I did have a lot of different friend groups that I...
Like, you weren't just
like
part of one friend group.
Yeah, actually, a lot of my friends were saying, gee, you should host or like create the event for the 10-year reunion because you were part of like so many different groups.
You're on that level? Damn.
I think I hung out with a bunch of different groups. So...
Were you like valedictorian or something?
No.
Because isn't valedictorian just like the most popular person who everyone is friends with, but also academically?
Yeah, the academics part was lacking there for me. So.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any guesses what archetype I played?
The nerds.
Yeah, obviously that's not a hard or trick question. I was part of the nerd group. One time, okay. Last thing, and we'll move on. In like grade 10 or something, our science classes were split up according to level. The acronym that our school used was organism or organisms. So O was the most proficient science class. Like the smartest science kids were in O. And then there's R. And then there's G. And I can't remember. I think I was either in R or G. I got placed in either R or G. And then once that placement was confirmed, I think I was in G. One of my good friends, he walked up to me and he was in O. And then he looked me like dead in the eyes, completely serious, like, David, I'm so disappointed. I thought you were one of us.
Who determined like who goes where?
Like,
was it based on grades?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
damn.
So
I'd feel so defeated if I was like the M.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, it's also intended to I don't think the intention is to shame anyone. That would be ridiculous and inappropriate for a school system to do that. But it's to provide appropriate, learning environments based on your competency. What's next?
Okay, this next one is called ambitions. So in your 20s, this guy, his eyes are beaming. There's stars around him. He's like, I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to change the world. And then in your 30s, like the guy is like couch potato with a beer belly. He's like, wow, this chair is super comfy.
Okay, so my reaction is complete BS. I'm the opposite. Because in my 30s, I'm coming to terms with my situation. We talked about this in some of our early episodes, right? It's about sitting here and looking around and asking ourselves, is this really the life that we want for ourselves? Is this it? Because just doing the status quo like this for the next 30 years ain't going to cut it. So I actually feel the complete opposite. I'm more ambitious now than I've ever been. I don't think that's translated necessarily to anything. I mean, the podcast, it takes a lot of effort, so we'll give ourselves a pat on the back for that. But, I'm quite interested to try and get out of the rat race. So like, I don't want to work a 9 to 5 in the long term. And so if you guys can all share this freaking podcast so we can monetize it, that'd be fantastic.
Please and thank you. So your mindset, it's about the mindset. So you don't think in your early 20s you had this like super ambitious mindset to be like, okay, I can do anything?
I didn't. I was just going through the motions. I was just trying to like, I graduated. All right, let me just get a job. All right, got a job. All right, pretty good. And am I earning more and more every year? Do I get a promotion every now and then? Yep. All right, it's pretty good. I'm not an ambitious person baseline compared to ambitious people or even the average person. So I'm not really the best person to ask about this. I've stayed at the same company for over 10 years. That's not the definition of ambition. Okay. So
comfort.
Yeah.
I think mine kind of came in waves. Like, I think when I was in university, I was like, ooh, like the world is my oyster. There's so many things I can do. And then by the time I was about to graduate, I'm like, okay, I don't have like that many options. Like you said, I kind of just want a job. And then now, like the mindset has changed a bit. Like, okay, what else can I do beyond like my 9 to 5 job? Is there anything else I can do that more aligns with like my passions? But it came in waves. I think maybe in my like early 20s I was a bit more naive in that sense too. The world is my oyster, I can do anything. Or maybe I should have just put that mindset to use and be like, yes, I can do anything, and then go pursue it. I was like, I can do anything, and then I felt like I was out of options. So
well, here's a question. So imagine you just turned 40. What is it that you would be disappointed that is not a part of your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I know what you're saying.
For example, for me, if I'm still working at the same company when I'm 40, I'd be like, David, what's going on? Right? Or for you, maybe it's like, oh, if you're still living in the same apartment, you'll be like, okay, so what's something that comes to mind?
If I'm still single by 40, I'd be like, okay, oh my God.
That's an easy. It's a low-hanging fruit there.
But yeah, also just like something that I'm like finding a passion, it's not even about like pursuing the passion, like just finding something. Cause I like my job. I feel passionate about it some days. But something outside of career.
Yeah. All right. Next, the wisdom of wrinkles. Wrinkles start to make their presence known in your 30s, reminding you that time is marching on. You'll experiment with various anti-aging creams, serums, and elixirs, hoping to discover the fountain of youth in a tiny bottle. But at the end of the day, you'll embrace the lines as a sign of experience, wisdom, and the hilarious facial expressions you've made along the way. So skincare, I guess, and aging, and visually aging, I guess, be much more cognizant of that and insecure about that. Do you relate to that at all?
I'm more cognizant of that. I don't know if I'm necessarily insecure about that, but I do want to, like, I am finding myself using more or better skincare to, just be preventative, I guess. It's not necessarily that it's an insecurity thing, but just, I don't know, who wants to get wrinkles faster? If there's stuff that you can put on your face to like make it go slower,
That stuff often costs an arm and a leg, as in it's very expensive.
Yeah, but I mean, for that, I feel like that, similar with like health and wellness stuff, I find that all to be in the same category. I personally think it's worth the money.
So yeah, that's the part I don't get. I mentioned this at the beginning, right? But I don't know. And I'm not saying, this is just, I guess, me. You choose to use your money any way you want. But if it's for health reasons, I'm all for it. If it's for aesthetic reasons, I'm shaking my head here. I'm just not into it. You put on sunscreen because you don't want skin cancer. That's fine. Yeah, I'm not a fan of people who make a lot of decisions and invest a lot of money to try and fight reality, I guess. Because I'm just I'm someone who's so obsessed with just being who you are and like embracing and living it truly and fully. To me, skincare that tries to mask reality in a way, to me, feels inauthentic. Obviously, there's a lot of societal pressures to look young and beautiful, and I for sure understand that part. But as we've mentioned in our last episode, I hate anything that is compelled because of societal expectations. So I don't know if I'm just being completely unreasonable in my opinion here, but...
No, I can see your point. But on the flip side, even if you're not doing it for society, sometimes, like, don't you ever... Like when you get like a fresh haircut or whatever, you look in the mirror and you look good. Like you think you look good and then that makes you feel good. Regardless of what society thinks. Like, do you ever have those days where you wake up and you're like, hey, I kind of look good today? If you look good, you feel good.
Yes, but because I have the annoying habit of always digging deeper, I would ask myself, why do I feel good? Well, I feel good because of society, in my opinion.
Sometimes it's just not that deep, you know? Like sometimes you just look at yourself and you're like, hey, I look good today. And then you just feel good. Like regardless if you think if it's because of you or if it's society.
If I lived on a planet where I'm the only human, I would not have any emotional reaction to how I looked, good or bad. I'm pretty sure of that. If literally no one exists other than myself, I don't think I would care how good I look. I don't think it would make me feel good.
That's an interesting thought.
Okay, next.
I have to think about that a bit more.
Give me another comic.
Okay. Dating pool. So in your 20s, this guy's jumping into a pool with a lot of people that look like single people. Like the pool is full. And then in your 30s, the picture is Deadpool, like the comic, the Marvel character. These comics are actually so funny. Like if you guys, we'll link it and you guys should go take a look because it's quite hilarious.
So it's suggesting that the pool of available singles to dates is very small?
Yeah. Is that different for girls and guys?
Yeah, I have to say it probably is because there's the very unfair reality/trend that guys can be older and still date younger women.
Yeah, I feel like it gets better for a guy as they get older.
It kind of does. And I know that that's super unfair. And I've talked to girls who feel very strongly about it. So I am sorry that that's the trend, but that is how it is. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's good. But
yep, Deadpool.
Yeah. So do you feel your dating pool is shrinking? You just turned 30 and yeah,
I think so.
I don't know.
I think so. How rude. Okay, this is interesting. Well, this is kind of like related. The topic is single life. So the girl is in bed in her 20s. She's like, oh God, I love being alone. And then in her 30s, she's like bawling. And she's like, oh God, I'm going to die alone.
The fear of dying alone is really visceral. And it's a very universal fear.
I've asked like one of my friends, her biggest fear is dying alone. So she would prefer to, oh my God, we're getting like so deep now, but she prefer to die before her loved one so that she doesn't have to die alone.
Damn.
Yeah. Oh God, that's morbid.
I think, I'm going to jump off.
I don't think this comic was meant to be focused on dying alone. It was more focused on...
It's more that when you're in your 30s, the lack of companionship hits you harder than when you're in your 20s. And you know what? I think a big part of that is not necessarily because of anything that might change with you as a single person, or not you specifically, but if you are single. But I think a big part of what contributes to that shift is the fact that many people do couple up. And so all your social circles and society and the people that you're around, the majority of them end up being in a couple. And then if you're the one who's still single, then you're the odd one out. But can you imagine if the majority of people in their 30s were single? Let's say the majority of your friends were single. I don't think you would feel that lack of companionship hit as hard. Because if it's Valentine's Day, right? Like, let's say all your friends or most of your friends are single, you guys would just get together, have a Galentine's. It's your birthday and, you have a birthday party and everyone's not showing, you're not 11th wheeling because everyone's single, everyone's just partying. I think it's just because everyone else couples up, and if you're single, then you're not. That it makes it feel worse. Again, I think it's a relative thing. Society. Hate fucking society, man.
So moral of the story is society is our demise. Yeah, I was just going to say,
do you agree with that at all? Or do you think so? Like, if all your friends stayed single, I don't think the lack of companionship would hit as hard.
Yeah, but isn't it also human nature to like want companionship? Like, I'm going back and thinking about your example of like you were the last or only person on earth or whatever. Would you crave that companionship or no?
Yeah, but companionship comes in many different ways. Like Uday said, right? You can have really good friendships.
Yeah, okay. So like a romantic companionship, I guess, if you would crave that. Or are they all kind of like the same?
So I think this might differ between females and males. I'm not a spokesman for the male species, so I would just speak for myself, which is kind of weird. Because what I want to say is that for guys, or for me as a guy, the only thing we would crave is sexual companionship. Honestly. So a statistic that ChatGPT threw at me was family formation. The average age of first-time parents has been steadily increasing over the years. In the US, the average age of first-time mothers is now around 28, while the average age for first-time fathers is around 31. So I don't know about you, G, but I saw the statistic and I felt a little personally offended because I'm 33. I'm not a dad. But I would imagine that those numbers used to be even lower back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those numbers actually don't really surprise me because I can see that like 28 seems pretty average. This is pretty normal,
but you're turning 30 and I don't think, do you have any friends that have a baby?
I have one friend.
Yeah, exactly. That's one friend. But like we're social butterflies, so we all know G has a lot more friends than that. So this statistic does not reflect our lives at all.
It doesn't reflect mine, but I mean, it kind of depends on your friend group too, right? Like I see a lot of my high school friends have kids. For what I see on social media, a lot of people who are a bit younger have kids. I mean, there's so many factors though, right, that go into it. So I don't know. It really depends on your situation. Do you want kids? Have you ever said this?
I don't think I've said it on the pod. I do want kids.
He says with shifty eyes.
But I think my life would not be incomplete, or I would still be able to live a meaningful life without kids personally. So I do want kids, but I say that sort of with trepidation because a lot of people say that in a way where it suggests that their life will only be fully meaningful if they had kids. Like, I want kids. It's like, without kids, it's not going to be good. I think I could have an amazing, beautiful life with kids, but I think I could also have an amazing life without kids. Having said that, I do want kids because we'll talk to my friend next week about fatherhood, but I think I would enjoy being a dad. Mm-hmm. I think I would enjoy. I thrive on responsibility, and there's no responsibility greater than being a parent.
Being a parent,
I think. So I think that would really push me to become my best self, I think.
Cool.
Let's wrap up with home ownership. So home ownership, ChatGPT says, the 30s tend to be a pivotal time for home ownership. A report by the Urban Institutes indicates that the home ownership rate among individuals aged 30 to 34 is approximately 38%. A significant increase from the 20s. I'm actually surprised. 38 is not as high as I thought it would be. Just anecdotally, among your friends, what percentage do you think owns property, either as an investment or to live in? Roughly.
Like 25% right now? Yeah.
Own property?
Yeah, own property. Oh, maybe even less than that.
That's quite low. I'm surprised.
Yeah, maybe 25%. They're either renting or they're still living with their families, I think. So,
well, as a teaser, I do want to talk about this in a future episode. I'm not sure who I'll have on, but the realities of home ownership versus renting. I have a pretty contrarian opinion that renting is often a very sound and advantageous financial decision, but the vast majority of people disagree with that. So I think that'd be an interesting conversation.
That's fun. Debate on it. So this last one is called Making Plans. And one girl is saying to the other, I got an extra ticket. This is in your 20s. I got an extra ticket to Berlin. Flight's in 3 hours. Are you in? And then the other girl's like, hell yeah. And then in your 30s, the girl's like, want to grab a beer after work? And then the other girl's like, sure. Does the year 2022 sound good? Wow, this must have been created like a few years ago because
we get it.
2022 is over. Yeah. Do you find it harder to make plans now?
So spontaneity versus advanced planning.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider yourself a spontaneous person or less so or more so now?
More so now, actually. I think it's because I live on my own and I live in like a more central location. It's easier for me to just like grab my things and go.
That's a really good point because like I know some friends who, for example, if you ask them, they're like, oh, I already told my parent I'm already told my parents I'm gonna eat dinner at home tonight. So not gonna come out. That's a very common excuse / reason that people give.
Or like if you want to meet at like a more central location and they're coming from like an hour away, like you can't just be like, want to go out? So
yeah.
You're a plan maker. Are you spontaneous at all? I feel like you always have to make a plan with you and you like put it in your schedule and then it has to be like a few days in advance.
Well, it doesn't have to be. It's just that I can operate like that as opposed to someone, if you ask them, oh, can we meet up next week? They're like, whoa, that's way too far in advance. Just ask me like the day before. I can do that. If I'm, let's say someone texts me like, hey, you want to grab lunch tomorrow? I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. So in that way, I don't think I'm not spontaneous. I think people in general are less spontaneous now though, because people are just busier, right? Like you don't have as much time. A lot of plans. So the opportunity to be spontaneous is not as frequent. Mm-hmm. I think the conclusion is most of these stereotypes are pretty on point. Like I don't think they're... Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that was like completely there was a couple that was opposite.
There's a couple that I disagreed with. Yeah. Okay.
All right. I guess that wraps up our episode. We'll talk more next week.
Okay. Bye-bye. I really hope you all enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, we'd appreciate if you could take a moment to share our podcast with your friends. Follow us on whichever podcast platform you're using. Give us a rating on Spotify or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We would also love to learn about you, our amazing audience, and shine a light on your unique journeys. Do you have a story about what helps you thrive in your 30s or challenges you've overcome? Let us know at that30showpod@gmail.com or DM our Instagram, that30showpod. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful week ahead.